Mania is going to end in kind of controversial fashion with two WWF title changes in about 2 minutes. Yokozuna is going to defeat Bret Hart, and then himself will lose to Hulk Hogan in an unscheduled match. So Hogan works with you guys, then he comes out after Hart's match with Yokozuna, and he's going to defeat Yokozuna very quickly. And a lot of fans seem to believe that Hogan politicked himself into the spot, and Bret Hart feels that Hogan pressured Vince into giving him the belt. In my mind, it was likely just a business move on Vince's part because Hogan is a proven draw and he's returned to the company. But I know that you're buddies with Hulk and you've got a good relationship with Bret. But what are your thoughts on the matter? Do you feel that it was some kind of a political thing by Hogan?
I don't really no. I don't see that. I don't see that. It was like it's a way for Hulk Hogan to become the champion again without having to wrestle Bret Hart and beating Bret.
Mm.
That's what I think.
Okay, so they just wanted to get the belt on Hulk.
And I mean, again, because Bret was the champion going into that first match, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I just, I don't. Yeah, to me, it was a way to get the belt off of Bret and back on Hogan without them having to wrestle each other.
So Bret claims that there were actually photos taken after this of he and Hogan kind of wrestling over the belt, and the plan that he was told was that it was supposed to be he and Hogan working at I believe it was King of the Ring in 1993. Ultimately, Hogan would wind up working with Yokozuna, and Bret says that it was just changed last minute by Hogan, who said, "quote unquote," that Bret was not in his league. Now, I don't know how true any of that is. Certainly, I wasn't there, and Bret's account is his account. But all that being said, Ted, do you feel like a Hulk Hogan versus Bret Hart main event, babyface versus babyface for the title, would that have been a big draw?
It's hard for me to say. I mean, I don't know. It's wow.
Kind of a tough one, right?
Never really thought about it. I mean, I have all the respect in the world for Bret in terms of, and he and I have worked well together. And
It's kind of two conflicting styles when you look at Bret Hart and Hogan. Bret Hart is very much a technical wrestler, but not a huge character guy.
yeah,
Bret Hart was never going to cut like the big, fancy promo. He wasn't like a cartoon character. On the other side, you've got Hulk Hogan, who looks like he's straight out of a comic book and acts like he's out of a cartoon on his promos. So it's like very conflicting styles. I don't know. Sometimes opposites make for a good match.
well, and again, see, I grew up in the business, and I understand Bret Hart's style because that was like a style that it's kind of like this is back when we were when we weren't we understood that most people watch wrestling and say, okay, it's not couldn't possibly be real, but we make it as realistic as we can. I think it would make a decent match, but you're going to have to work to Hulk's style.
Mm.
I think, because Hulkster was not a guy who because I mean I worked with him, but I didn't spend a lot of time with a wrist lock or a headlock or anything like that. Most of the time it was battling. And what I did at the first of a match with him is I just put over his size. Like I'd lock up with him and he would just shove me off, and I'd hit the corner like whoa, and then lock up, and I would like top wrist lock him, and he would just power out of it. And then I'm shaking my head, going, "What do I do with this guy?" And so then we lock up, and I back him into a corner, and the referee says break, and I go to break, and then I sucker punch him, and I take over on him, and then I just beat him down, but every time I try to pin him, he kicks out.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I go for something, whatever it is, and I miss. And then when I turn around, I look. He's, and I'd had him on his knees, and I'd hit him and hit him, and he would do that thing where he just went,
The Hulk up.
and then he hulks up, and then when he hulks up, it's all over. He does his thing.
So yeah, Bret Hart would have certainly had to adjust his style to work with Hogan, and for perspective too, Hogan is used to coming off this really big run, where he was like Rocky essentially, where it was just one monster heel after another. Hogan looks like he's down and he can't beat him. Then of course he beats him and he's on to the next. It seriously is a formula just like they used in the Rocky movies. And now it's the possibility of working with a guy who's not a monster heel. He's a smaller technical baby face. Now, look, I know that you weren't there for any of these conversations, but I do know that you're a smart guy who's been in wrestling for a long time. Would you say that Hulk Hogan took a look at Bret Hart and his size and said, "That doesn't work for me, brother"?
There's no way of knowing, but maybe. Yeah, maybe. Because they didn't really have a run.
Never. I think they had maybe one match in WCW, and it was like some underwhelming, like 3-minute thing.
Yeah. And of course, I don't know if there's I've never heard that, but was there any kind of personality conflict?
I know that Bret Hart was always fine with Hulk and felt like they had a good relationship. They'd worked together in like Japan and elsewhere over the course of their careers before this. And so according to the story, I think that Bret said that once he won the championship, Hulk started treating him differently, where he was like a little bit more cold with him. And then after this, apparently Vince told Bret that Hulk had come to Vince and said, "I don't want to work with him. He's not in my league." Something to that effect. Now, again, Bret Hart has got his own perspective on things. Neither of us were there, so we don't know how legitimate these claims are. But when you hear stuff like that, and then you kind of start putting the pieces together, like I have, like, well, Hogan was used to working with big guys, very different style. This is like the new generation type wrestler, and Hulk Hogan's the quote unquote old generation. It does kind of make you stop and think, like, man, why didn't those two wrestle?
Yeah, and I never thought about it, and I don't know the answer to any of those questions. But I mean, I respect both the guys. I mean, I have a world of respect for Bret. I mean, and Bret and I we had great matches together. But again, I was big, but I was big enough, like here's Hulk, and maybe here's Bret, and here's me.
Hmm.
I was a big guy. I mean, 6'4", and and Bret wasn't. Bret was maybe I don't even know if he's 6 foot, but
Right. So maybe that made you a little bit more attractive to Hulk because it looks
yeah,
like you could put him in danger, right?
yeah.
I don't know. The whole thing makes you wonder. But obviously you weren't there to hear any of it, so I won't hold your feet to the fire.